back to the Ultimate Piano Course by Joseph N. In all of our previous videos, we've shown many musical examples on the staff that showed all of our notes and what we were talking about, but they also showed different types of notes. Some were filled in, some were not, some had stems, some had bars across the top. They all had different types. So today, we're going to finally discuss note duration. Let's go ahead and get started. One of the most important elements to reading and playing music is the rhythm itself. Without rhythm, our pieces lose that sense of individuality, and we have no idea what they're supposed to sound like. To know what the rhythms are, we need to know what each of the different type of note durations are. For that, let's take a look at this diagram. Here we can see the names of all of our notes, what those notes look like, the rest of respective equal value, how many beats those notes in rest are worth, and what that would look like written out on the music. Let's first talk about what a beat is. A beat is the underlying driving force behind a piece of music. It's what makes us want to dance, it's what makes us want to move. Whenever you want to tap your foot or snap your fingers alongside a piece, the beat is the underlying force that makes you want to do so. With that in mind, let's talk about all of our notes now. We'll begin with a quarter note, which is equal to 1 beat. So it's the most basic unit of measurement. Next up, we have a half note, which will be equal to 2 beats. Therefore, it's twice as long, so it will be held out longer. A whole note is even longer than that, worth 4 beats. In the other direction, we have an eighth note. This is where notes become faster, and it is only worth half of a beat, so it's half the time. Lastly, we have a 16th note, which is a quarter of a beat, and is therefore even faster. Let's move on to our notes and rests columns now, beginning with the quarter note again. A quarter note looks like a D, but the circular part has been filled in. And a quarter rest looks like a piece of calligraphy that is in the shape of a lightning bolt or a zigzag. Going up to a half note, the circular part is no longer filled in. And for a half rest, we can refer back to our mnemonics again. A half rest looks like a top hat. So the HA is the same, half, hat. For a whole note, we remove the stem and flatten the circle even more. And for a whole rest, again use your mnemonics. It looks like someone's digging a hole. Hole, hole. In the opposite direction, we have eighth notes. An eighth note looks very similar to a quarter note, but there is a flag attached to it. And an eighth rest looks like a 7 with an eyelash, or it has a little curl on the top. As for 16th notes and rests, we see that now it has 2 flags on the 16th note, or 2 curls or 2 eyelashes on the 16th rest. The final column shows how many notes would fit in 4 beats. The whole note itself is 4 beats, so there would be the only note there. A half note is 2 beats each, so there would be 2 of them. Moving on, a quarter note is 1 beat, so there would be 4 of them. An eighth note is half a beat, so there would be 8, and a 16th note is a quarter of a beat, so there would be 16. Note the similarities. Half has 2, quarter has 4, eighth has 8, and 16 has 16. We also need to talk about the definition of a rest. I've mentioned that all of these rests have the same respective value as all of their notes. So a whole rest is 4 beats, a half rest is 2 beats, and so on. But what is a rest? Well, simply put, a rest is simply just silence. You have silence for the listed amount of beats instead of any notes. Depending on where you live in the world, a lot of these notes have different names. For example, in Europe, the whole note is referred to as a semibreve. The half note is a minim, the quarter note a crotchet, the eighth note a quaver, and a 16th note a semiquaver or double quaver. Something important to note. All the notes we've talked about thus far, except for the whole note, have a stem attached to them and are shaped like the letter D. Depending on how high or low a note is written on the staff though, it may be rotated and shaped like the letter P instead. The way to tell is very simple. If a note is written on or below the third line of the staff, the stem will point up and it is shaped like a letter D. If the note is written on or above the third line of the staff, the stem points down, and it's shaped like a letter P instead. The notes that are on the third line depend on the context of the notes around them. If all of the notes around them are written above, then the stem will follow suit and also point down. If all of the notes surrounding were written below, then the stem will again follow suit and point up. Lastly, we need to talk about what the rhythms feel like and sound like on the piano themselves. So, first let's start by playing quarter notes. Each of these will represent one beat. If we want a half note, we're going to have to hold it twice as long because it's 2 beats. So to demonstrate, I'll have my quarter notes in my left hand and my half notes in my right hand, and you can see the right hand will be much longer. The whole notes will be even longer still, 4 beats. Again, my left hand will play quarter notes, and I'll play whole notes in my right hand, so you can count 4 beats for each of them, or 4 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sense? Now, going in the opposite direction, we have 8th and 16th notes. This is where things start to get very fast, so we have to be careful with how fast we go. I'll have the right hand play the quarter notes this time, and then the left hand will play the 8th notes instead. Take a listen. If this is the speed of our quarter notes, the 8th notes are going to go twice as fast. Likewise, if we go to 16th notes now, those will be 4 times as fast as a quarter note. So again, my right hand will be the quarter note now, and my left hand will be the 16th. Let's recap everything we've learned thus far. We began by talking about the different types of notes we have. Beginning with a quarter note equal to 1 beat, it's shaped like the letter D with a filled-in circle. A quarter rest would be 1 beat of silence instead, and is shaped like a lightning bolt or a zigzag. A half note is 2 beats and looks like a D that is no longer filled in. For a half rest, it'll be 2 beats of silence, and the half rest looks like a top hat, so use the HA as a mnemonic. For a whole note, it's worth 4 beats, and a whole note itself has no stem and the circle is flattened again. As for a whole rest, it looks like it's digging a hole, so use the word hole and digging a hole as another mnemonic. In the opposite direction, we have 8th notes, which are half of a beat, so they will be twice as fast. An 8th note looks like a quarter note, but it has a flag attached to it. And an 8th rest looks like the number 7 with an eyelash or a little curl on the top. A 16th note is a quarter of a beat and has 2 flags attached to it. And likewise, the 16th rest will have 2 of those eyelashes or 2 of those curls attached to it. Depending on your region within the world, some of these notes have different names as well. A whole note is called a semibreve, a half note a minim, quarter notes are crotchets, 8th notes are called quavers, and a 16th note is called a double quaver or a semiquaver. Lastly, notes can either be shaped like the letter D with the stem pointing up, or P with the stem pointing down, depending on their location on the staff. If they are on or above the third line, the stem will point down and they will shape like the letter P. If they are on or below the third line of the staff, the stem will point up and they will be shaped like the letter D. Notes on the third line depend on the context of the music around them, and will follow suit with all of the notes surrounding them. Be sure to look over these charts and study all of the rhythms as we move on to our pieces, and we'll apply them into some of the pieces we learn in the next few videos, and I'll see you then.